Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on how the EU is leading on the largest act of ocean protection. My name is Mike Walker from the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition. I'm just going to give a couple of introductory slides before handing over to our hosts, members of the European Parliament, Grace O'Sullivan and Catherine Chabaud. And I should, of course, start by saying or thanking them for agreeing to do that. So just in terms of some basics, I think we're all very familiar now after more than 14 months, but nevertheless, if you would like to ask some questions in the Q&A, there will be a Q&A session after each of the two panels. The recording, of course, and the webinar is being recorded, will be circulated, I think probably on Monday, so just before World Ocean Day on Tuesday. If you would like to follow the conversation or contribute to it, the hashtag #CallOnCAMLR, you'll see there's been quite a bit of activity already on that. And, you know, for your own preference, speaker view. The panelists will be there throughout, but, you know, as you wish. Okay, so just in terms of the agenda, we have a couple of video addresses by the Commissioner Virginia Sinkevičius, also by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Then there'll be a panel focusing on the environmental opportunity that we have this year, and based on the history of Antarctica and the Antarctic Treaty. Then a second panel on the specifics of designation of these marine protected areas in 2021. And after each of those panels, there will be a Q&A. So at this stage, I would like to hand over to our two hosts, Grace and Catherine. Thank you.
I would like, do you hear me? Because okay. I would like to thank my colleague Grace for her help in setting this conference, and with whom I share mutual experiences of the sea, especially some in Antarctica and around Antarctica, Iceland. I would also like to thank the Antarctica and Southern Ocean Coalition and the Pew Foundation for their hard work. We join today to try and push forward the setting of 3 MPAs in what I believe is one of the richest biodiversity areas on the planet. Before setting foot on the Antarctic continent, I bypassed it twice on my 2 world tours. I'm an MEP today, but I used to be a sailor a long time ago. These seas are particularly rich in terms of wildlife. We are constantly accompanied by albatrosses, which can spend several years at sea before landing on the subantarctic Iceland to reproduce. Seeing cetaceans is common, but I was very surprised to find krill in my cockpit, brought on board by the waves. These pink shrimps that are being eaten by whales or penguins, and which make colonies of penguins turn pink with excrements. When I stopped racing professionally, I followed in the footsteps of an Irish explorer, Grace, for whom sailors have a fascination, Ernest Shackleton, and mounted an expedition in 2005 in southern Georgia, probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. Don't repeat that, but it's very, very beautiful, South Georgia. Before reaching the Antarctic Peninsula aboard the schooner Tara, I was amazed by the beauty of the landscapes, but also by the richness of the seabed, because we had on board biologists and diver, probably, I don't know if you know him, Laurent Balesta, who brought on board breathtaking images of life, and I invite you to watch the documentary he shot called Antarctica. I have also already seen the marks of our pollution and of the pressure from tourism, which has since continued to develop. Since I arrived in the European Parliament, I have continuously tried to make the voice of our ocean heard. We all know how easy it is to overlook the state of territories far from us, from the heart of the Amazon forest to the depths of the Weddell Sea. In October 2020, I wrote a letter signed by 86 members of the European Parliament to the Commission and to the members of the CCAMLR, expressing our collective concerns on the deadlock situation regarding the MPA negotiations. During her State of the Union speech, President von der Leyen explained that the creation of those MPAs was a priority of a mandate. We need to keep putting pressure from a collective standpoint. NGOs, politicians, civil society, and citizens, we have the power to act together and change the course of ongoing negotiations. Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor to Grace. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I'm hoping you can see me also and hear me clearly. Thank you very much for your words, and thank you for attending and hosting today. And also, I would like to just welcome everyone who's watching this webinar and participating. I'm very excited about the webinar today because I think we have a superb panel of guests. So both Catherine and I, just to begin, we're both MEPs and we're both fellow sailors. Both of us have a passion for the oceans, and we use our opportunity in the European Parliament to advocate on behalf of ocean conservation and protection. So I've seen the Antarctic myself, as Catherine has, firsthand. As a Greenpeace activist in 1986, I was part of the crew that sailed into the Ross Sea, where we anchored for a few weeks and set up base camp. And our objective was to campaign for the protection of Antarctica and to strengthen a treaty on Antarctic protection, which came into force a few years later, called the Madrid Protocol. I also believe I'm one of the only Irish women to have seen that Shackleton base camp. So we have two famous Irish polar explorers, Ernst Shackleton and Tom Crean, and their experiences in the Antarctic were always of huge, huge interest to me, and in fact to the all of the school children in our schools in Ireland today, and across the world. Of course, they are well noted polar explorers. So we now need to come together again and emphasize Antarctica as a place of peace, a place of science, and a place of global environmental importance. And that it's so important that we now have two massive MPAs in Antarctica, and they need to be managed and protected. And as Catherine said, just last September, in the State of the Union address, President Ursula von der Leyen made it a priority, Antarctica a priority. And while relations with Beijing and Moscow are difficult, I still believe this is an achievable task. Paris, Berlin, Washington are mobilizing on the issue, and Catherine and I will be working in the coming weeks and months to get the European Parliament to do similar, to mark the anniversary of the Antarctic Treaty and to demonstrate how the Southern Ocean can be a place where humanity comes together to restore our relationship with nature. So over the next hour and a half or so, I invite you all to listen to our experts and distinguished guests as they explain how we can make history this very year. But first, we'll start with the messages from the Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Virginius Sinkevicius, and that will be followed by a video address from the Commission President herself, Ursula von der Leyen. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, dear Grace, dear Catherine, the protection of the Southern Ocean against the dual crisis of biodiversity loss and climate change is incredibly important. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it painfully clear how urgent it is to reverse global biodiversity loss. We must repair our relationship with nature to prevent future disasters. For too long, we have closed our eyes when ecosystems were being destroyed. We can no longer continue down that path. Instead, we must take action to protect our planet's biodiversity hotspots, including the unique and fragile marine ecosystems and biodiversity of the Southern Ocean. The waters around Antarctica also play a key role in regulating the global climate. Unfortunately, climate change is already having profound and potentially irreversible impacts on the Southern Ocean. It is the responsibility of the entire international community to address this dual crisis. And as a member of the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, the European Union is taking a leading role. Together with the EU member states, we have proposed to designate 2 new marine protected areas, one in East Antarctica and another one in the Weddell Sea. In addition, Chile and Argentina have proposed to designate a 3rd marine protected area in the Antarctic Peninsula. Although CCAMLR initially made good progress in establishing a representative network of marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean, in recent years we have seen increased reluctance from some of its members to agree to new marine protected areas. I will not hide my disappointment about the ongoing resistance to our proposals, but at the same time, I feel encouraged by the broad support we have received from many other CCAMLR members so far. The designation of new Antarctic marine protected area is a high priority for the EU and its member states. It's a key deliverable of the EU's biodiversity strategy for 2030 and of our international ocean governance agenda. We will spare no efforts. In her first State of the Union address, Commission President von der Leyen stated explicitly that the EU would use its diplomatic strength and economic clout to broker an agreement on these proposals. And that's what we have been doing ever since. On 28th of April, I personally hosted a ministerial meeting with other like-minded CCAMLR members to explore how to build support for our proposals. The meeting was a success. We managed to increase the number of co-sponsors for our proposals, which were already being sponsored by Australia, the United Kingdom, Norway, and Uruguay. John Kerry, the American Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, announced the USA decisions to co-sponsor the East Antarctica and Weddell Sea marine protected areas, and New Zealand did the same. Over the coming months, we will continue to reach out to other CCAMLR members, in particular to the very few who still remain to be convinced. We will keep on pushing for the adoption of our proposals by CCAMLR as soon as possible, and if possible, still at its next annual meeting in October later this year. It would be a fitting way to mark the 40th anniversary of CCAMLR. This would also send a strong signal to the international community ahead of the 15th Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of Parties, which will take place in Kunming and Glasgow respectively. If we join forces and speak with one voice, we will have a better chance of convincing others of our cause. I therefore really appreciate the efforts of members of the European Parliament, of civil society, and many other stakeholders to keep this issue high on the international agenda. So let's keep on fighting together to win this battle and protect Antarctica's unique marine life for present and future generations. If we succeed, it would be the largest act of ocean protection in history and a major leap forwards in the global recognition of the value of biodiversity and ecosystems. Thank you.
Dear Grace, chère Catherine, ladies and gentlemen, biodiversity loss is one of the greatest threats to our planet and to our health. Our seas and oceans are a particular concern. They are our most natural ally in the fight against climate change, and they are the first to feel its effects. Nowhere is that more important than in the rich and vulnerable marine life of the Southern Ocean. We can visibly see Antarctic ice melting at an ever faster rate, which is no surprise. Temperatures have reached as high as 20 degrees Celsius. But this is not just about the Antarctic. It is about the effect it will have on oceans and climate around the world. And this is why the EU and its member states are proposing to establish 2 new large-scale marine protected areas. One in East Antarctica and another in the Weddell Sea. We're doing this together with a number of like-minded partners. If approved, these new zones would protect an area of over 3 million square kilometers. This would be a great achievement. Of course, we know that it will not be easy to reach an international consensus. We still have particular challenges with some partner countries, but we are willing to fight hard. We know it can be done. As we saw 5 years ago with the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area. It took courage, leadership, and political will to push for the greater good. But it was worth any effort. Antarctica is a natural treasure that belongs to all humanity. We have to protect this common good. And this task is a common duty as well. And that is what the Antarctic Treaty has always been about. On the 60th anniversary of the treaty, I am hopeful that the stars will align for us to reach an agreement. Europe will mobilize all its diplomatic strength to get there. And I thank the European Parliament for its continued and determined support. Our joint efforts are bearing fruit. We saw it in the ministerial meeting hosted by Commissioner Sinkevičius in April. The US and others stepped in to join our proposal. Together we will fight for the protection of the Southern Ocean. Of course, this mission is also part of a bigger picture. We are working towards global commitments to protect 30% of our land and our sea. This is a goal for the Biodiversity COP15 in China, and we are aiming to increase climate ambitions at COP26 in Glasgow. The oceans are essential for both. We are determined to turn words into action. And reaching an agreement on concrete measures to protect our Southern Ocean would be a very powerful message. I count on your continued support, and you can count on mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, and to Commissioner Sinkevičius for your very strong words and your very strong message. And I too hope that our stars will align with our global partners and that we can reach a global agreement for the protection of Antarctica. As President von der Leyen noted, the oceans are our most natural ally in the fight against climate change. And as you heard from Commissioner Sinkevičius, he has some concrete plans in the coming months to try to achieve our aims in terms of Antarctica. So we are now going to hear from our distinguished experts about this extraordinary place, about historic efforts to protect Antarctica and about opportunities, but also about the potential obstacles or barriers that could that lay ahead or could hamper our progress. So in this panel, we will discuss the environmental opportunity for the protection of the Southern Ocean. Firstly, we will hear from Cassandra Brooks, Assistant Professor in Environment Studies at the University of Colorado. And Cassandra is an expert on Antarctic toothfish and was instrumental in winning the Ross Sea Marine Protection Area in 2016, which remains the largest marine protected area on the planet. Then we will hear from Klaus Dodds, Professor of Geopolitics at the University of London. And Klaus is a leading global expert on polar geopolitics and has written extensively on the topic and how Antarctic protection is a unique example of successful multilateralism. And finally, we will hear from Wengye Liu, who is Associate Professor, Director of Macquarie University. And Professor Liu is well versed in polar issues as an author and academic, and he is presenting work. He is presently working on geopolitics of the Antarctic Treaty System. So I will hand over first to Professor Brooks and then go straight into Klaus Dodds and followed by Wengye. You have 5 minutes each, and just after 4 minutes, I'll give you a little tap of the gong, and that's just to give you a heads up and to round off. So we'll start with Cassandra Brooks. Over to you now, Professor Brooks.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It truly is an honor. And I need to start by taking you to Antarctica, this icy continent at the bottom of the world. And before the continent was discovered, the ancient Greeks insisted that a great southern land must exist in symmetry with the north. Without it, they said, the whole earth would topple over. And I love this metaphor because the Greeks were more right than they knew. Since its discovery, scientists have documented that the Antarctic stores 90% of the world's fresh water, it regulates our climate, and drives global ocean circulation. And despite its harsh conditions, Antarctic waters teem with life. Indeed, the Antarctic contains some of our last healthy marine ecosystems. Part of the reason we have healthy marine ecosystems here is that Antarctica has been protected by ice and remoteness, but also political will. In the Antarctic, we have a rich history of exploration and science that has created a framework for international collaboration. And I want to highlight the scientific collaboration of the 1957-58 International Geophysical Year, which led directly to a political collaboration, and the signing of the Antarctic Treaty in 1959 at the height of the Cold War, which sets aside the entire continent for the sake of peace and science. Under the Antarctic Treaty System, CCAMLR manages the waters around Antarctica. In line with the principles of the treaty, grounded in science and precaution, CCAMLR is considered a leader in marine resource management. They currently have 26 member states, and all decisions are made by consensus. In line with CCAMLR's leadership, they began working towards a network of Southern Ocean marine protected areas in line with international targets. The Ross Sea, on the map in front of you, was a priority area. It was the most productive stretch of the Southern Ocean, supporting disproportionate marine life, pictured before you. And in a global assessment of human impacts on the world's ocean, the Ross Sea stood out as being the most intact large marine ecosystem left in the world. We created a flood of media around the Ross Sea in support of its protection. We brought the Ross Sea to policymakers and to the public. We branded the Ross Sea as the last ocean, and millions of public citizens engaged in this campaign. We generated extensive science in support of protecting the Ross Sea, and in 2010, the United States and New Zealand began formally working to develop a proposal for a Ross Sea marine protected area. There are so many stories from within the room at CCAMLR, who meets every year in Hobart, Australia, to make policy decisions, of the diplomatic negotiations over a Ross Sea MPA, which went on literally until all hours of the night as diplomats worked to find a way forward to reach consensus. The moment former US Secretary of State John Kerry took on the effort for a Ross Sea MPA and decided he wanted to achieve it during his term. The stories from the White House when President Obama incorporated a Ross Sea MPA into part of climate negotiations with China, and the incredible efforts worked within Russia to find the political levers of influence, which finally led to consensus. I wish I could share with you the moment in the room on October 28th, 2016, when after 10 years of working towards this effort, including 5 years of intensive negotiations, CCAMLR finally came to consensus. The room exploded in applause, nations were hugging nations, and it became clear that this was not just an environmental win and a gift to future generations, though of course it was both of those. But it was also like the signing of the Antarctic Treaty as a peace treaty in the height of the Cold War. This was a diplomatic win and showed that despite tensions between some states, the Antarctic continues to be an exceptional space dedicated to peace and science. Here before you is a picture of the head of delegation, New Zealand's head of delegation, Gillian Dempster. She's holding a map of the Ross Sea MPA, which the CCAMLR Secretariat printed right after adoption and invited all the delegates to come sign it. It was immediately a source of pride for CCAMLR. And we have the opportunity to take action again. Protecting the 3 additional MPAs under negotiation at CCAMLR would be the largest act of ocean protection in history. I'm looking forward to seeing CCAMLR member states show leadership now in 2021. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much as well for the invitation to come and present to you. And in complete and stark contrast, I'm not going to show lots of very, very attractive images to illustrate the points that I want to make, but I hope these bullet points will do the trick in terms of giving you a sense of why Antarctic geopolitics and its intersection with science, and of course I include fisheries science in all of this, is crucial to understand because it really does have important ramifications for the kinds of efforts that Cassandra talked about so elegantly with vis-a-vis ocean conservation. The first thing to point out is that the 1959 Antarctic Treaty did of course recognize Antarctica as a space of and for internationalism. It very much built on the collaborative spirit of the International Geophysical Year. But the other thing of course that the Antarctic Treaty did was that it didn't try to resolve 2 really knotty issues. The first was the contested sovereignty politics of the Antarctic. After all, there are 7 claimant states, and the United Kingdom and France, just to take 2, are part of that club. 2 other notable countries, the then USSR and the United States, are often described as semi-claimants because they have reserved the right to make a claim in the future. And everybody else has largely and emphatically rejected these sovereignty claims. Well, the treaty doesn't try to resolve that. It really came up with an ingenious way of making sure that parties could work with one another, whilst at the same time agreeing to disagree over ownership. The second issue, pointedly, that the treaty and those who were tasked with its negotiation did not speak about explicitly, was resources. Now, everybody in the late 1950s knew that Antarctica had resource value, but everybody, when they came to that conference in 1959, knew that resources was intimately linked to sovereignty and ownership, and there was a danger that the internationalism that they sought to cultivate would be jeopardized. So during this Cold War period, I would suggest that there's always been in some ways, a useful and productive tension between wanting to manage Antarctica collaboratively, but at the same time, every party, whether they're a claimant or non-claimant, seeking to manage and protect and even enhance their own interests. So there is, in essence, a balancing act to be struck between those claimant states, including, as I note, the European ones, and the major non-claimants, as well as the smaller ones, including, for example, the European member state, Belgium. That is also, of course, further complicated by the emergence of newer parties. And I say newer, of course, because some of them, such as China, India, and Brazil, have been party to the Antarctic Treaty System for a number of decades. But that system, of course, has successfully reproduced itself. And that's been really important because actually by this stage, in other words, 2021, well over 50 states are now signatories or fully consultative parties to the Antarctic Treaty. So despite all the underlying tensions that have had to, in essence, be managed, the Antarctic Treaty System has been really a remarkable achievement in maintaining that spirit of internationalism. One of the key challenges, however, that has been near constant over the last 30 or 40 years has been managing the living resources of the Southern Ocean. This is where, in essence, the resources do come home to bite as a diplomatic issue. The living resources of Antarctica, particularly fish and krill, are of huge interest to a whole series of states. And what we've seen over the last 40 years is, in essence, a schism between states that wish to pursue conservation and states that wish to pursue rational use. So fisheries science diplomacy has always been a demanding affair. As it used to be said by the late John Heap, no data, no fish. And that's really been quite important with the marine conservation areas or the marine protected areas. You really do need to acknowledge that fishing, conservation, geopolitics, science, resource management are all caught up with one another. So whilst I think Cassandra is absolutely right to celebrate the achievements of the Ross Sea MPA, which was notable, it's also worth reminding ourselves that it has a clause, a sunset clause. It has certain, for example, allowances for fishing activity, and it became smaller than was originally hoped for. So when I talk about a competitive strategic environment, I simply mean that, of course, cooperation is always possible in the Antarctic Treaty System, but we also have to be mindful of these wider geopolitical currents that make our dealings with countries like Russia and China challenging, but critically not impossible. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How we see the present affects what futures are possible. As someone who did a PhD in Belgium at Ghent University and subsequently a Marie Curie Fellowship funded by the European Union before embarking my career in Australia, I always claim myself as a friend of the European Union. As a friend, today I'm going to tell some hard truths about how the EU could win China's support to establish Southern Ocean MPAs. I have three take-home messages for all of you. The first one is, we have a choice. The second being, we have the momentum. And finally, we, the human beings, are a species that is capable of imagining and creating a better future. Let me be stark. We are living in a dangerous world with growing geopolitical tensions. I can feel it sometimes as a Chinese Australian academic. But my question to you is, should we just let this go on? Or should we make great efforts or greatest efforts to turn this around to build a future with peace and good environment for us and for our future generations? And if our choice is the latter, international law can help, like what Antarctic Treaty does and did and still does over the past 6 years to maintain peace and science for the icy continent. I think the establishment of the marine protected areas under CCAMLR is another way to maintain the peace and science in the Southern Ocean. We do have the great momentum this year as the so-called delayed super year of biodiversity. They say engagement with China is dead. I say engagement for what? Engagement for addressing shared concerns such as climate change and biodiversity loss. The opportunity is still there. We have seen some very positive signs after the inauguration of the Biden administration. John Kerry paid a visit to Shanghai in April, and immediately after that, we see the US-China joint statement addressing the climate crisis. And after this statement was issued, at the beginning of May, the Chinese government approved the Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement, which has been long overdue. It took 3 years for China to approve that. But this is a very positive sign, and you may wish to know that the same, like many governments, the same group of people within the Chinese government working on polar affairs. So it's not just Arctic, it's also Antarctica. And there is a clear political signal sending from Beijing saying that if there is an issue of shared concern, there is a political will to collaborate. The question for the EU is, of course, how? We all know that China is going to host the COP15 in Kunming, for the CBD COP15 in Kunming in October. So it's a great opportunity for China to showcase its global leadership on biodiversity conservation. How? I think when it comes to answer how, I want to just give two suggestions tonight. The first one was emphasized by the commissioner, that to speak in one voice. Divided, you fall. To speak in one voice is important to make sure the EU is an important global actor that can be influential in this increasingly geopolitically intense world. But more importantly, so once it comes to the internal, once the EU solves this internal chaos, then externally, I see the golden opportunity that is this September's EU-China Leaders Summit. So when it comes to China, the leaders-to-leaders engagement, or the so-called top-down approach, is the most effective. So last year, for example, in June, the EU-China Leaders Summit focused on the EU-China Comprehensive Investment Agreement, and that was done. Of course, there are now other issues around it, but I would suggest this year, the Leaders Summit should focus on environment. I mean, let's focus on environment as a central theme and produce a package deal filled with political will. I mean, in this package deal, it could include CBD COP, the post-2020 framework, Southern Ocean MPAs, and also the EU-China's joint solution, or at least the statement on addressing climate change issues. In this case, I think if the political will can be filled in September, then in October, when the CCAMLR has its annual meeting, then a yes from China may be possible. In conclusion, if you ask me, is European Union able to engage with China and Russia to establish the Southern Ocean MPAs? I think the answer is yes, you can. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you.
So thank you all very, very much. That was really interesting and very broad approach. Fascinating to listen to. I have a question for each of you. So I will give each of you a question. If you could, we'll start with Cassandra, then Klaus, and then Wengye. And if I'll give you your question, and then if Cassandra wants to answer hers, then Klaus can answer his, and then Wengye, if you'd finish with the final question. So Cassandra, what lessons from 2016 should EU leaders be taking on now? And what role is there for the Biden administration? And Klaus, do you think there's an opportunity for Antarctica to be the site of historic agreement while global relations are a little bit, let's say, frosty? And then last, Wengye, I'm just wondering, in terms of China, and you were very frank and in your address, but do you think the positions on climate and biodiversity and protection in the Southern Ocean, are they consistent? And I suppose, lastly, Wengye, do you think China is taking the EU's position on Antarctica seriously, or would China consider the EU small fry in this regard? So over to you, Cassandra.
Thank you so much for the excellent question on lessons from 2016 and the role of the Biden administration. Well, one core lesson from 2016 was that we worked at the intersection of science, policy, and the public to secure consensus. And I can't underestimate the role of public engagement, the huge scientific effort combined with high-level diplomacy, negotiating trade-offs, building and at times breaking and rebuilding trust, working with opportunities for leadership, which all led to the political window of opportunity for the Ross Sea. And when that window opened, we were ready. For the MPAs currently under negotiation at CCAMLR, we have strong science in place supporting the proposals. We have extensive public engagement and support. So what we really need now is sustained leadership and high-level diplomacy. We need leaders who can work across the diverse member states at CCAMLR and build support and ultimately consensus. And we really do have an amazing opportunity in this moment in the United States where I am, where President Biden was vice president when the Ross Sea MPA was adopted. Secretary of State John Kerry was instrumental in leading the charge, as I mentioned. And they're both here back in the administration in the United States. And both are working towards ocean conservation domestically and in the Antarctic. The United States is likely to support EU leadership as they have joined as co-proponents along with other CCAMLR member states on 2 of the MPAs currently under negotiation. And the experience of the US in 2016 is that sustained diplomatic engagement will be critical to securing these additional protected areas under negotiation at CCAMLR. Thank you.
Klaus.
Again, another excellent question. I think I would say just a couple of things. I think number one, I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of polar science diplomacy and ocean science diplomacy. I mean, these are really powerful tools at our disposal. And I think it's worth just bearing in mind, if we just remind ourselves what happened in the Arctic not so long ago. Both Russia and China co-signed, along with the European Union, the Central Arctic Ocean Commercial Fisheries Agreement. And I think it's really important, particularly when dealing with Russia, to take advantage of the fact that Russia is chairing the Arctic Council. Russia is eager in the next year or two, I think, to be recognized for its achievements in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. And we should remind Russia, China, and others that having marine protected areas is not all or nothing. You know, it doesn't mean, for example, you can't continue to fish in the Southern Ocean. CCAMLR is quite clear on that. It talks of rational use, but it also talks of conservation. And I think the final thing I would say is we should continue to strive to be as clear and transparent as possible about why we are proposing these particular marine protected areas and why they are the size they are, for example, and the conditions that are applied to them matter, if you will, in an ecological context, not in some kind of covert geopolitical context.
Yeah, thank you, Grace, for your question. Wonderful question, and also just following Cassandra and Klaus, and to begin answering the second question from Grace, you first, it's like, I think from my observation, I mean, the Chinese delegation understands the EU's position on the Southern Ocean MPA clearly. They understand it very well. They have their technical concerns, which is around fisheries. But I think what is the major, or let's say what added oil to the China's opposition is actually the kind of the mistrust, and this growing mistrust comes from the growing geopolitical tension over the past years, especially during the Trump era. So that I think that geopolitical tension really fueled into Chinese opposition, even though there have been a very clear understanding of the MPA positions. And and also to be very concrete, I think they never said no. I think what technically their problem on the Ross Sea MPA is around the establishment of the research and monitoring plan of the Ross Sea MPA at this stage. So that is very important technical issue for them to be comfortable and then move to the next 3 MPA proposals. But it doesn't. So this actually gives the opportunity, for example, for the East Antarctic MPA, to have a very sound research and monitoring plan ahead together with the proposal. And then come back to your first question is like, I think that from my understanding, when it comes to climate change and biodiversity conservation, these are the more overarching kind of statement or position or practice that China takes. And the Southern Ocean MPA is kind of a second tier kind of small specific issue under those bigger policy framework. So for climate change, now it's very clear. They have announced that by 2050 that China will reach carbon neutral. And for the biodiversity, I think this is to come. This is to come, and I think Kunming is the moment, and it will land something for sure, because this is how I think for China and Russia, like Klaus said, I mean, when they are hosting these important conference parties, they will reach. They will conclude something concretely for sure. Yeah, thanks.
Grace, your microphone on.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you very much for your responses. And Wengye, you have me now on the edge of my seat waiting for Kunming for a really strong position coming out of that important conference. So really, you know, listening to your replies, I think that collaboration and building trust is crucial. The science, as Klaus was saying, like the polar science and the ocean science, and the science is strong in Antarctica and needs support. And that, again, collaboration around the science is critical in terms of the future of the planet as well. And then the other point that both Klaus and Wengye, you know, you talk about, Wengye, you said about the monitoring and managing of the MPAs, well managed, monitoring program, well managed, can lead to, as Klaus was saying, like almost a win-win situation if, again, that collaboration and trust is strong amongst all of the different stakeholders. So thank you all very, very much. That was inspirational. And I am now going to hand over, and I can say just about on time, to Catherine Chabaud. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all, and thank you, Grace. Now we are going to shift our focus from the academic and historical context and explore what is happening now to win the historic protection this year. We will hear from Olivier Poivre d'Arvor. Olivier is a Polar Ambassador of France, appointed late last year. Since then, he has been working hard to secure a positive outcome this year. He is in constant contact with Emmanuel Macron office, and was recently in Moscow, where he met with senior officials. I don't know if Olivier will be in capacity to share all the negotiation he's trying to push. Also, Olivier Poivre d'Arvor is chairman of the Musée National de la Marine in France, the National Maritime Museum. Then we will hear from Geneviève Pons, who has Director General of Europe, Jacques Delors, member of the Scale-Up Committee of the Paris Peace Forum, but also as a member of Antarctica 2020, she has contributed to the advocacy in support of these areas in Paris, Brussels, Moscow, and Beijing. Also, Geneviève is very committed in the Starfish mission on ocean regeneration. Then, and finally, we will hear from Ellen Green, Sweden's ocean ambassador, who has been actively supporting and advocating for the protection of the Southern Ocean, and is especially engaged as Sweden currently holds the position of chair of the CCAMLR. So, Mr. Poivre d'Arvor, I give you the floor. Merci, Olivier.
Thank you, Madame la députée. Thank you, Catherine and Grace. I'm very impressed by what you have done today, in fact, and I'm so happy to see Ursula von der Leyen and Virginijus Sinkevicius addressing us such messages. So good afternoon to everybody. My country, France, is very much committed. I would say she has never been so much committed to securing Southern Ocean protection this year and not the year after. The pending proposals about East Antarctica and the Weddell Sea have been postponed for too long now, 7 years. We have made clear for us that a decision must be taken at an appropriate, probably political level prior to this year's CCAMLR meeting, which will take place in October. Starting on the 14th of June this year, France will host, as you know, the annual meeting of the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting, ATCM. For the third time of our history of the Antarctic Treaty, France, one of the founding signatories, will chair the ATCM. On a previous occasion, that was in 1989, then Prime Minister Michel Rocard, who became after Ambassador for Poles, one of my glorious predecessors, Michel Rocard made a very historical decision in launching a decisive step toward a definitive protection of Antarctica, now embedded in the 30-year-old Madrid Protocol. Although the Antarctic Treaty as such is only about Antarctica or the Antarctic land, it is a cornerstone of an international legal construction now recognized as the Antarctic Treaty System, which also includes instruments such as the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resource, CCAMLR. France and all members of the Antarctic Treaty and CCAMLR are committed to conserving Antarctica for peace and science. This year, as tensions rise, but so too global temperatures, Antarctica can and must again be the place we set aside our differences. The challenge ahead of us is very clear. Will we be able in the 20th century to do as well as our predecessor 60 or 30 years ago in the middle of Cold War? Is the international community still able to bridge diverging approaches for the benefit of the whole planet? So this year, really, France is very much committed to contribute to this goal, and as regarded the creation of these 2 new marine protected areas around Antarctica, a top political priority. The Prime Minister Jean Castex will open the ATCM meeting, and President Emmanuel Macron already has raised the issue for 2 years with his counterpart Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, because we are speaking about only 2 countries, which are Russia and China. As newly appointed ambassador of France for ports and maritime issues, as you say, Catherine, I devoted my first mission abroad to visiting the Russian authorities in Moscow in April this year. That was quite interesting because my first partners, my first go-between at the beginning of the mission were fisheries agency, which is not the right level. I'm not in charge of fisheries. So day after day, I would say I tried to explain our arguments and probably try to convince my partners. And again, yesterday at the St. Petersburg Forum, which is a very important event, I did it again. This priority is shared by our civil society, as Geneviève Pons, the marvelous Geneviève, will explain in a few minutes, but also by our parliament, because a transpartisan resolution in support of marine protected areas has been tabled in the French National Assembly and is enjoying active support from all political sides. It's not finished. Next week, I'll meet for the third time the Chinese ambassador in France, because we are unable, due to the sanitary crisis, to go to Beijing. And I will try also to convince our Chinese friends. The TU proposals are an extraordinary opportunity to make history in the same year that states will be meeting in Kunming and in Glasgow to agree on far-reaching responses to the biodiversity and climate crisis. This year's calendar is a very unique succession of important meetings. Let us not waste this historical opportunity. So we can start that process in Antarctica, and we must start it this year, demonstrating that we are serious about 2030 targets and our commitment to reach them. Thank you.
Geneviève, je te cède la parole.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And very, very glad and honored to be with you today and very impressed by this event. The picture you have on the screen dates back from 2019. And I think it is the beginning of a wonderful story. I am a member of a coalition, Antarctica 2020. Pascal Lamy is a member of this coalition too. This coalition was created by José María Figueres in 2018. You know, José María is the former president of Costa Rica, the brother of Cristiana Figueres, a militant for the protection of our planet. And we are all the members of Antarctica 2020 militants of the protection of our planet. And in a certain way, this day, Emmanuel Macron accepted to become a militant of Antarctica protection. In 2019, for the first time, we had a few words on the protection of Southern Ocean, of vast marine areas around Antarctica in both the Franco-Chinese Declaration in March 2019 and in the EU Chinese Declaration a few days later. It was only a few words, but the beginning of a beautiful story. So we can go to the next slide. And here, of course, you have one of the major steps on this beautiful way forward. You have the speech on the state of the European Union given by Mrs. von der Leyen in September this year at the European Parliament. And we recognize, we militants of Antarctica 2020, our own language. This would be one of the biggest acts of environmental protection in history. And Mr. Sienkiewicz has used the same words in his speech today. So we have now militants of this cause in France, in Germany, in the European Union, and this is absolutely wonderful. So we have other example of this wonderful story. Next slide. Next, yes, the ministerial meeting organized by Commissioner Sienkiewicz is a real diplomatic success. So we see that the EU is able to become a leader on the global scene and to have real big diplomatic successes. In this ministerial, we have won the support of the US, the active support of the United States for the protection of these two areas. Not that we doubted that they would support us, but they are now a proponent. They are co-proponents with the EU of the protection for the Weddell Sea and East Antarctica. And we can go to the next slide. You will see the declaration of Mr. Kerry. It is not only the support of one of the most powerful states in the world, but it is also a symbolic victory, as Mr. Kerry has already associated his name to the wonderful story of the Ross Sea protection. So this is a very big success. However, I think that we have still some progress to do. And this is what we will see with our last slide. Mike, yes. So we are on a very good basis because the EU has shown that it is able in this area to have leadership. The EU is in a unique position to lead. However, coordination is still needed. You can come back, please, on the way. Coordination is still needed between proponents to convey strong messages together. We have heard in the preceding session that it is not out of reach that both China and Russia can come to support us this year. For China, there is a need for coherence between being the chair and champion of biodiversity in Kunming and supporting protection of the Southern Ocean. This message is a very simple and obvious one, and we have to give it to China all together. And for Russia, protection of the Southern Ocean would be more consistent with its impressive Antarctic legacy than blocking these MPAs. So what impressive Antarctic legacy? Russia is the country that has discovered Antarctica with the navigator von Bellinghausen, that, as his name does not show, is a Russian. And also, Russia has been one of the first signatories of the Antarctic Treaty, and it was in 1961. So, well, the entry into force was in 1961. So there is a big anniversary to be celebrated this year. So we have our strong messages to Russia and China, and hopefully we will win their support. Thank you.
This is Ambassador.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. And thank you for inviting me to this important and very timely event. I'm really honored to be here. And thank you to all the previous speakers for your excellent and important remarks. As Sweden's ambassador for the ocean, I have the privilege to advocate for enhanced implementation of SDG 14 in the context of Agenda 2030 as a whole. Sweden's global ocean priorities are to promote ecosystem-based ocean management and marine protection, to enhance sustainability when blue sectors are growing, and to prevent and tackle pollution, and to raise awareness on the ocean climate nexus to secure ocean resilience. The science is clear. Marine protected areas are vital to protecting biodiversity, to rebuilding marine life, and increasing resilience to climate change. By protecting at least 30% of the ocean with a network of sanctuaries, marine ecosystems can build resilience to better withstand rapid climate change. And when adopted, the 3 current proposals for marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean will be a substantial contribution to this goal, as well as the SDG 14.5 target to protect 10% of the ocean by 2020. We need these decisions now, after years of growing global challenges and leadership questioning multilateral cooperation. Humanity is currently at a crossroad. It's time to decide if we will continue the path to further destruction and loss of resources and ecosystem services, or to embark on a new path towards recovery, restoration, protection, and resilience. And we have seen positive signs from leaders. They have signed pledges and joined high ambition coalitions for people and nature. CCAMLR members have a unique opportunity to prove that leadership this fall and to vote yes for the Southern Ocean MPAs. Hopefully following an ambitious outcome at the CBD COP in Kunming the weeks before. Such decisions will also provide impetus for ocean and nature-based solutions at the UNFCCC COP in Glasgow. As firmly laid down in the Antarctic Treaty, Antarctica can be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. International cooperation for science purposes is at the backbone of the Antarctic Treaty regime, of which CCAMLR is an integral part. And it has been demonstrated over the years that the member states of CCAMLR are capable to sustainably manage marine resources and protect marine biodiversity in Antarctica. Notably, CCAMLR has pioneered the ecosystem approach to support the sustainable use of marine living resources. Many initiatives are in place to conserve and sustainably use marine living resources, but we still have challenges, most notably from climate change and unsustainable exploitation, such as illegal, unreported, unregulated fisheries. And CCAMLR has been a model for constructive multilateral conservation cooperation. And now there is a need to restore and improve the spirit of constructive cooperation to ensure that CCAMLR remains such a model. We are willing to do our share, also as the current chair of CCAMLR, to improve and build on the CCAMLR structure. And we will ensure respect for international law and science-based decision-making and bring it to the forefront of our chairmanship. Of particular importance are to strengthen cooperation on climate change and its impact on marine ecosystems, and to deploy area-based management tools as a respected ecosystem-based conservation measure, and to combat marine debris and IUU, and to support digitalization. The European Union has engaged in substantive outreach to CCAMLR members to progress Southern Ocean conservation. And we are so pleased that the US and New Zealand has joined as co-sponsors of the proposed MPAs in the Weddell Sea and East Antarctica. And we must build on this momentum and increase efforts for constructive dialogue with China and Russia. At the end of the day, all people of this planet depends on a healthy ocean. And the world ocean is dependent on a healthy and abundant Antarctica and Southern Ocean. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you to all of you. I will have, before speaking the question, we will have a look on the chat. I will have three questions, one for each of you. Olivier POIVRE d'Arvor, how can the EU leadership contribute to the efforts of the Élysée and Chancellery? To Geneviève Pons, how are you confident in it can happen this year? What makes you believe the scenario is different? And to Hélène, as chair of the CCAMLR and a committed polar state, how does Sweden believe we can win the designation of these protected areas in 2021? Thank you. Olivier, je te cède la parole pour répondre. Olivier POIVRE d'Arvor, do you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm here with you. Thank you, Catherine, thank you. I'm very grateful of you have done since the beginning of EU. You really are the key institution, and what you have done on 28th of April with the Commissioner for Fisheries, Environment, Ocean, Sinkevicius, to obtain joint support from the United States, New Zealand, the commitment of John Kerry, who is an expert on marine protected area. You know, he did so much in 2016 for the sea rose classification. So that's already a lot. And I was very, very impressed by the statement of Ursula von der Leyen as well. So that's the good news. The good news also are probably that we have this series of meeting, COP in Glasgow, in Kunming. But there are also some bad news, in fact. Bad news is the fact that there are only two countries, not three, to convince. We should be very clear. But two, not small countries, and Russia and China. And after a week in Russia, after having spoken with so many Chinese officials, I don't know at what level exactly, I'm still thinking that we have to fight because that's not made at all, you know. And the arguments are not clear. They say no, we don't need marine protected areas, and we don't have the result of the 2016 classification of the Weddell Sea. We have to wait perhaps the next CCAMLR because this one will be online, so that's better to discuss in another scale. So this was not good. And there is only one thing to do, that Madame Merkel, Mr. Macron, Madame Ursula von der Leyen, and the Swedish Prime Minister, the Australian Prime Minister, just, I don't have the number of phone, that's phone number, just call Mr. Putin and and the President of China and Xi Jinping. That's the only thing to do now, because it's really at this level. It's Mr. Putin himself, Mr. Xi Jinping himself, not the number 3 and number 4. That will be a discussion between head of states, and I will be very pleased if Madame von der Leyen can do that directly to this two head of states of China and Russia. And Mr. Macron definitely will do the same as well in the next weeks. And it should be done before, let's say, middle of September. We don't have to wait CCAMLR. CCAMLR is too far. CCAMLR is a technical meeting, you know. The decision must be taken mid-September before the Kunming COP, clearly.
Okay, thank you very much, Olivier. Geneviève, do you want me to repeat the question, or you've got it?
I have it in mind, of course. You asked me if I am confident that it can happen this year. Our name is Antarctica 2020 because we believed that it could happen in 2020, but it did not. It did not for reasons that everybody can understand. Well, among them, of course, the fact that at the head of the US, there was a person who was not very supportive, but okay, and also the COVID-19 crisis, of course. But now we have much better conditions. We have a new US administration. We have the commitment to carbon neutrality by the US by 2050, and also by China by 2060. And we have this Kunming conference that was supposed to take place in 2020, but which will take place this year in 2021. So we have very good conditions. Where I agree with many of the speakers is that we have now to push at the highest possible level and to make it a central point of the EU-China summit. I think that this is probably the most efficient way to get there, highest level, and especially starting with this EU-China summit and the equivalent with Russia, of course, because both very big, very powerful states have to be convinced, and they will be convinced together. One will lead the other. Thank you.
Merci Geneviève. Hélène, you answer the question.
Yes, thank you for that question. Well, I think a really important point is to have a strong coordination, close coordination. And I'm really pleased that His Excellency Ambassador POIVRE Darvaux has taken on the outreach mission with such energy, and that the issue is so high on the French political agenda. And I really look forward to work closely together to strengthen dialogue and coordination to secure results at the next CCAMLR meeting. So, and I really think, like has been stated here in this dialogue, that we must seize the opportunities of the upcoming meetings, like the EU-China summit, the meeting in Kunming, which is an excellent opportunity to show leadership. So if we can work closely together and coordinate our efforts, I think that this is possible.
Great, thank you very much. Before giving you the floor to all of you, both on the two panels, if you have any closing message, I just would like to ask two questions. Listening to all of you, I wonder the question in 2016, as Cassandra remembers, it was the time for John Kerry, but now Ursula von der Leyen, is she the John Kerry of 2021? Why? Because you all remember of the great leadership of US in 2016. Why won't EU will be the leader? Will take the leadership in 2021? My first question, and the other one, I don't really understand the link between the creation of those two marine protected areas and the other negotiations. The preservation of Antarctica wouldn't be linked to the other, of course, the climate and biodiversity negotiation. But when we speak about the economic negotiations, you understand what I mean? Because of all the ecosystemic services the ocean gives to the humanity, the protection of Antarctica ocean is our collective and individual responsibility. So my question is to push the diplomacy. I understand the diplomacy is something hard and we have to speak about other files, but we should separate the Antarctica, the future of Antarctica and all the other files, according to me. So I don't know if my question is clear, but 3 years ago with some experts, we launched an appeal for the ocean to be recognized as a common good of humanity because of all the ecosystemic services the ocean gives to the humanity. And now I think we have we don't have to negotiate the future of Antarctica, of our ocean, our global ocean, and Antarctica ocean is a big part of our global ocean. So thank you very much. And who wants to take the floor for a conclusion before Grace and I will conclude?
Catherine, if I may, Olivier. No, I perfectly understand your question. But the moment is not easy, you know, because the EU relation with Russia is not at its best. And when Mr. Borrell came to Moscow, he was not properly welcome. And so I came more modestly, but a month after, and it was the time where some diplomats were expelled from Russia as well, from European diplomats were expelled. So the political scale is not the best we can imagine. And the relation between the United States and China and Russia, all these things are such a new area with the Biden election. So that's something we should really always remind. And clearly, as it was in 2016, you know, it's just a matter of high-level people, Madame von Leyen, speaking with Mr. Putin directly. And that's quite easy. But we should organize that. And at the same time, there should be perhaps a joint call coming from Madame Merkel and Mr. Macron to Mr. Xi Jinping, things like that. We should organize this political agenda, which will be the unique possibility for obtaining these two new marine protected area. Instead of that, again, we will have the Fisheries Agency of Russia in front of us for some stupid reason, because in fact, Russia doesn't fish so much. But if she will fish krill, and as China will do, and that will be dramatic for the fauna and the flora of Antarctica. So let's try to organize all together this, let's say, joint call to our two partners, Russia and China. I don't know if I really answer your question, Catherine, but I wanted to repeat again. That's wonderful what we do. I do my best on a very modest way. The civil society has made a huge effort with Antarctica 2020 is really a wonderful occasion to put some people even coming from Russia. I think about Slava Fetisov, MPs of the Duma as well, all together fighting for gold. But you know, that's now just, let's say, 3 or 4 people, influential people, Biden himself, addressing a call to these two reluctant head of state.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier. Who wants to take the floor to conclude before I give the floor to Grace? Nobody? Cassandra?
Maybe I can just throw in a few questions, Catherine, that have come in during the discussion. In fact, there's a lot of questions coming in and discussion, and it is really interesting to see the engagement. Olivier, I mean, the purpose of the conference was, the title is EU Global Ocean Leadership. And definitely, I support what you say there. It would be wonderful to see the President, Ursula von der Leyen, taking lead in terms of those phone calls or whatever mechanisms she could use to build bridges. But the questions that have come in, and I'm just going to throw it out into the floor. If any of you I could come back quickly with a reply. But the first question is, how will the German elections and the ensuing change of leadership in Germany impact on MPA work? So I don't know if anyone has a comment on that. I'll put that question first. Anyone like to come back on that question?
Again, me, but the election is the 26th of September. And
Yes.
That's too late. So if a call should be done, it's now, you know. So Madame Merkel has really a huge charisma, and she can't really be compared to anyone. And because our German policies, our relation with Russia is very unique. So she is a person who can do that, even if she would not have been chancellor. But now I'm speaking about June, July, August, not the end of September, which will be. You are right to remind us the German election.
Yeah. So strategically, it could be a good move if we could influence Chancellor Merkel to, in the final run up to the election, to use her position of influence at the moment to move in that direction. So that could be an action coming out of our conference. Another question from Jim Barnes is, what about the roles of Norway and the UK? And this is a particularly interesting time, given that it's only in the recent time that the UK have left the European Union. So I'm wondering, Olivier, would you like to come back on that, or would anyone else like to come in on that?
Yes, I spent yesterday. I met the Norwegian ambassador in Paris, a wonderful diplomat, and she confirmed that really Norway is very much part of the coalition, as UK is, in fact. I'm not sure Mr. Boris Johnson is going to call immediately Mr. Putin for this issue, you know, but they are UK, Norway, every country, in fact, only two missing.
Yeah, thank
Can
you.
I say something about that just quickly?
Okay.
Yes, I was just going to say I've answered the question in the chat directly, but I'd just make one quick point. The UK and Norway work very closely with one another in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. And one of the, I think, complicating factors, particularly when it comes to relationship with Russia, is that both countries are NATO members. And that has also led to additional strains with Russia. And so I personally think you'll find close alignment with the EU's support, particularly the East Antarctic MPA. But just to bear in mind, the Antarctic Peninsula MPA is awkward for the UK because it's been championed by Argentina and Chile, and the UK was not invited to be a co-sponsor. And that probably is related to sovereignty claims that are still, if you like, live.
Thank you, Klaus. I see, I can't see, but Genevra has her hand up, I believe, if you would like to come in.
I wanted to complete a bit the answer that were given on the two preceding questions. First of all, as far as Mrs. Merkel is concerned, yes, of course, it would be wonderful if the success could be obtained while she is still at the head of Germany. However, we should not forget that there are at least two other EU leaders who have charisma and who could lead the movement towards Putin and Xi Jinping. First of all, Emmanuel Macron, and he did so at several moments, including with Mrs. Merkel, and of course Mrs. von der Leyen. So there are two persons who can do it. And also something that we should bear in mind, in Germany, there is a strong party which is rising, and they are the Greens. So the Greens are likely to have more weight or even they have a serious possibility to be associated to the exercise of power. So this is something to bear in mind for the role of Germany, which should still be very important in this domain. And as far as Norway and the UK are concerned, in this field of environment action at the global level, we have still in UK and Norway very strong allies. And we are very much aligned on many matters, including, of course, climate change and biodiversity.
Merci,
Thank you.
Geneviève.
I have another question, and it's in the chat. It's slightly away from the political angle, but it's more on science and the science diplomacy in terms of MPAs and negotiations. The question is there enough data on ecosystems and biodiversity in the Antarctic? So is there enough, I know the word data came up several times, and I know that Helen mentioned the importance of biodiversity and ecosystems, but is there sufficient resources going into the building of data in the Southern Oceans, and then the ecosystems approach and the collective maybe use and sharing of that data, which would feed into the importance and relevance of having MPAs? So I'm just wondering who, maybe Cassandra or someone would answer that.
Grace, can I just quickly?
Yes, please, Nunge.
Yeah, so very quickly, this is actually a very kind of a key debating point between conservation states and the fishing states for the establishment of MPAs, and also that's actually the key debating point for around that research and monitoring plan for the Ross Sea MPA between China and United States and other CCAMLR members. So very quickly, so CCAMLR has been applying the precautionary principle, which means, or precautionary approach, if you like, which means, yes, we don't have enough data, but then because we don't know, we should leave it until we know. I think then the other way around from the Chinese argument is saying, okay, because we don't know, then we should know it first. And then we know it first, and then we can do something. So this is a very kind of ongoing debate at the moment, around the kind of the very difficult implementation of precautionary approach in when it comes to the fisheries management. Thanks.
Yeah, I can for a sec on that too, only to say that the proposals on the table, there has been so much extensive science done. And there's a point that needs to be made that you'll never have perfect science. Like, you absolutely will never have perfect data. And in the context of CCAMLR, it really is it the best science that we have available before us, and as evaluated by CCAMLR scientists in particular. And so I think that's an important thing to consider. And I'd love to come back to something Klaus mentioned about that quote of no data, no fish. You know, that's the precautionary principle. If we don't have enough data, then we shouldn't be fishing. And that's being reversed in the context of MPA, saying as if like, oh, no data, no MPA. And that just doesn't make sense from an ecosystem conservation standpoint. But what I can say from being involved in it, even in the Ross Sea, we have research and monitoring going on, being carried out by individual member states. So it is happening. That MPA is being actively managed, actively researched and monitored. And I can say that with a lot of confidence. And MPAs are absolutely grounded in good science.
Okay, we still have several questions, and we will conclude just after. A question for you, Olivier. How about the upcoming visits by the Australian PM Maurice to Paris? Can this be an opportunity to advance work on the East Antarctic MPA? Olivier?
Yes, clearly. Australia is an important partner, very important. So each high-level profile visit will be useful. I'm looking for I'm hoping a meeting with Mr. Putin, either for Mr. Macron or for Madame Merkel, or even for you in Brussels. That would be very useful also. So we have to check exactly who is going to meet who in June, July. But Australia, definitely, yeah, it will help.
And a short question probably to Helen. What about Iceland? Or someone else who wants to answer?
Well, maybe I could. I wanted to comment on the issue of science and data, because I think we should take the opportunity now. We have the UN Decade for Ocean Science launched just now. And this is an excellent platform also to increase and strengthen investments in research, in collaborative efforts, and to join resources to perform research in these remote areas, which is quite expensive and difficult. So there are a lot of opportunities to work closer together scientifically and to work on long-term scientific goals and efforts, and as part of a trust building process. So I think what we have been talking about also, engaging the public, the science community, the policy level at the highest possible level is key to success here. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all. Grace, I will give you the floor for our conclusion. Now, what can we do as a member of European Parliament? And we have something to share with all of you. Grace, speaking about our resolutions project.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. And look, this was really interesting. I feel it was, as we were getting into it, and the questions particularly, we realized that timing is critical in this and leadership is critical. I think, Olivier, you made it very clear that timing is crucial, and it's not even, it's pretty pertinent that things happen this summer. So that will hopefully put the speed on all of us to get on with things. Because of course we have COP26 coming up, we have Kunming coming up, we have a number of events, but you're right, Olivier, they're later on in the year, and we do have opportunities now. And I think, and I'm very glad that Catherine Chabaud and I have brought this conference together today with the support of the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition, because it is timely that we get a move on quickly. So just to conclude, I would like to thank everyone very, very much for your attendance. And I know you're in different time zones as I am here in Ireland. So I really appreciate the time and effort that you have taken to prepare and to present to us. And also to those who have joined us, I thank you very, very much, particularly all the people who are active in this area, and hopefully you will take some inspiration from the conference and we can all move together on the support and protection for marine protected areas in Antarctica. And at this stage, just to say that Catherine and I have been speaking in the European Parliament about putting forward a resolution in support of the marine protected areas, so that we would get the full support, hopefully, of all of our members of the European Parliament colleagues to support the efforts of the new marine protected areas. So that is something we will pursue with haste. And in the meantime, once again, I would like to just thank you all for your time, for attending, and particularly to Mike Walker and to the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition for hosting the event. And let's hope, you know, we'll all stay safe and we'll all have the energy, and we will do our level best to create the protections that we need in the Southern Oceans. And thank you all very much, and keep safe and keep well. Catherine, would you like to give a concluding word?
Just thank you to all of you. Thank you, Grace. It was great to organize this event with you and with the Antarctic Southern Ocean Coalition. I would just finish with the three keywords that Ursula von der Leyen said in her speech: courage, leadership, political will. And I think we have to gather around those values and ambition. Thank you very much to all of you.
Merci.
And thank you, Grace and Catherine, on behalf of the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Ambassador.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Merci. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.